Hello, class. I'm remaking the video for the Elements of Fiction exercise. Apparently the other one quit working. So this will be a brief one, but I just want to go over the instructions with that for you. That's kind of your first major writing assignment. So let me see if I can get this pulled up. Okay, so this there's two parts to this. The first is just the actual instructions for the assignment, and the second part is the just an example of kind of what I want you to turn in, and we're going to use Story of an Hour to kind of use that as a model. So okay, so the Elements of Fiction and Story of an Hour, this is a model for the writing part of the assignment. I gave you already the Elements of Fiction definitions document. You probably want to review that because that kind of gives you good definitions that will help you write this. Now there's two stories and you get to pick one. Okay, don't do both, but read both. Pick one. They're both very short. One's called A and P and the other one's called A Jury of Her Peers. I think these links will get you to those. I'll also put some in the syllabus course documents if you're having trouble getting to them. Okay, so read both of these stories. It won't take you very long. Decide which one you kind of like, interests you. You think you might have something to say about for this assignment. And then you're going to use the Elements of Fiction and Story of an Hour, which is this right here, is kind of your model. And so you're going to provide a brief explanation of the elements listed below for either A or P, A and P, or A Jury of Her Peers. Remember, it's or. Don't do both. Pick one. Okay, so we have plot. When you do plot, I want you to discuss each one of these elements, okay? Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution, right? So there's a lot of people don't get a very good grade on this because they don't do this. They just kind of retell the story, and that's not what I want you to do. With the narration point of view, who's telling the story? Why is this significant? Who's the protagonist? What makes them the protagonist? So you can't just say, well, Mrs. Millard is the protagonist in Story of an Hour. You've got to talk about, well, what features make her the protagonist, and the same goes for antagonist. It goes for all of these. You know, you just can't say, well, this is symbolism. You got to say, why is it symbolism? What do you think it's symbolic? Okay, because that's going to hurt your grade if you don't do that. All right, so there's 9 elements of fiction here. Just do your best on them. We're going to come back to these and touch on these. I'm going to actually in future writing assignments ask you to actually use some of these to help write your essays, okay? So there's something to get a pretty good handle on early, all right? So I think the due date's actually in the assignment for week 2. Okay, so this is just an explanation, okay? So you don't need to include this in your analysis, all right? So this is just kind of a breakdown of a short story that analyzes how the author uses various elements of fiction to make the story effective. And sometimes these elements are not really isolated so much from one another, they work together, okay? They influence one another, and kind of by understanding how these elements work and work together, we can gain a deeper understanding of the story, and even possibly how the story might be relevant to our own lives, even if it was written in 1894. And that's the one thing I want you to always think about as we're reading stuff. A lot of it's going to be older, and is it still relevant? The first 2 stories were kind of tragic, twisted love stories, but we still have love stories. That seems to be a major theme, you know, and I would say in literature and poetry and music, it's sort of like desire, loss, death are kind of the 3 big ones, you know, and desire you can kind of fold love into desire, and you can also fold love into loss. So those 3 big themes for us human beings. So as you read through the example below here, it becomes clear that conflict, the characterization of Miss Millard, setting, and symbolism are all closely related to help lead us to a statement of theme. Okay, so when we think of theme, what I think of is it's like a thesis statement. Okay, it's not the story of an hour is about fill in the blank. This just don't ever say the theme is what something's about. That's more kind of plot related. Theme is that kind of big idea, that central idea, you know, that writer's trying to get to. All right, and we'll kind of see an example of this as we go through. Okay, so and I think desire and loss, you know, either one of those could be themes for this story. Obviously death. So all right, so there's other themes too, and I'll kind of look at those. So, you know, here's kind of an example of plot, okay? And I just you don't have to write this like an essay. You can do it just like this looks. Doesn't even have to be in this order, but you'll notice I'll just say, okay, here's the element of fiction, write your thing, move on to the next, okay? So just keep it real simple, all right? So the plot's very condensed because it reflects the title. It takes place in 1 hour's time. It's told in a chronological order, the way the events happen. There's no flashbacks or anything like that. The exposition, this one's kind of important, is we learn that Mrs. Millard has a weak heart. That's kind of the first thing we know. And it's kind of the most important thing because the end wouldn't make sense if we didn't know that. Okay, so every story has an exposition. When you read Rose for Emily, it's a rather lengthy exposition, but we get to know kind of a lot about how the town sees Emily, okay, and kind of why she's a little bit the way she is, okay. So, you know, so like, you know, the resolution is when she learns her husband still lives, which causes her to die because of either shock or disappointment she experiences because of this revelation. You know, it's like the doctors say, oh, she died of the joy that kills. Well, that's kind of ironic, and we'll talk about that as we go along. So the conflict is not really between Mrs. Millard and Brantley Millard. It's really not between her and her family. It's really that she's experiencing these feelings that she knows, I probably shouldn't be feeling this way, but she can't help it, okay? Conventions of society, you know, I mean, she's not going to walk downstairs and say, hey, family, guess what? Brantley's dead. You know, new game going on here, you know? So she's not going to do that because she knows she shouldn't, even though she's actually feeling this way. And she's not really thrilled about it. She's just saying, oh, here's a new set of possibilities. Okay, so, excuse me. She is the protagonist. She is the protagonist because she changes. And that's kind of the key, is who changes in the story. You know, and that's a very general thing, but it's kind of a simple way to think about it. So she changes. She changes from being kind of sad about being married to going, oh well, here's a new game in town. And you know, you can use textual evidence to kind of help support your points in here. So here's a good example of that. Now, textual evidence is, you know, actually something that's in the story. So she says there'd be nobody to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. This is kind of an opposition with social conventions for women in the late 1800s. I think you would probably agree. Setting's hyper important here. 1894, women's role in America, in a lot of places quite different than it is now. Expectations different. Gender roles totally different. Okay. You know, you could even say setting. Now, here's the kind of part where some of these really interact. Okay. Could you make the argument that setting is the antagonist based on the cultural norms, the expectations of women and all that kind of stuff? Well, I think you could. Okay. This is told from third person omniscient. Now, keep in mind, before I read this one, you'll notice some of these are rather lengthy responses. Some there's not going to be that much to talk about. Okay, just other than kind of saying what it is. So this is third person omniscient. All we know is what's going on in her head. We knows what she's thinking. So, I mean, we get some glimpses of what the other characters are doing, but, or even thinking, but the main thing is everything we know comes from, her mind, or, from her point of view. Irony. Now, if you really look up the definition of irony, there's lots of different kind of ironies. I kind of like to just keep things general. And, irony is we know something the people in the story don't know. Okay. So the doctors say, "Is the joy that kills?" We know that she had this thing, this new life all planned out in her head. And then she goes downstairs and we see that all those dreams are shattered. Symbolism. I'm gonna mention one that's not in here, but the one that jumps out at the beginning is the setting when she's upstairs looking out the window and the trees are quivering and it's springtime, and we all know this symbolism for spring is rebirth, right? That's why we have Easter in the spring. So so she has this rebirth, this new opportunity. Okay. So those are pretty good symbols. I would also say heart is a really good symbol here. The first thing we learn, she has a bad heart. Well, she may physically have a bad heart, which we know, but we also, what's the big love symbol, the big Valentine's love symbol? It's the heart. Does she have issues with love? Does she have a weak heart when it comes to love? I think you could make that case. And then theme. So when we kind of look at some of these other elements of fiction, they kind of lead us to a theme. And a common thread is this conflict between the individual and social and cultural expectations. She's feeling this way. She knows she shouldn't feel this way. She can't tell anybody this. And then when her husband shows up, it basically kills her. So you could just say something simply like, social and cultural expectations are very powerful. It can at times force us to suppress our true selves and aspirations. And you guys, this is true. You think about how much, you dance to somebody else's expectations, you don't want to think about it too much because it's kind of depressing. But if you think about all the things you do because people expect you to do versus because you want to do, I encourage you not to think about that, because it is, again, kind of out of whack. So this is, if you just pay attention to this model here, I think you'll be able to do a really good job. Pick one of the two stories. You've got some time on this, so I'm not in a big rush. Not in a big rush to start grading papers yet. So hopefully this will help you as you move forward working on this this project. So that's about all I have to say. Of course, anytime you have any questions, be sure to send me an email, and I'll gladly get right back to you as soon as I can. I think for those of you who sent me emails would say that I get back pretty quick, and I try to do that as best I can. All right, so we will talk to you later.